1945. The cold, dark waters off the coast of Japan. Out of the chaos of combat, a lone American F4U Corsair, its engine silenced, spirals toward the sea. The pilot is gone, a tiny speck against the vast Pacific sky, but the fighter itself slams into the waves, a broken but magnificent prize. Within hours, Japanese patrol boats close in on the floating wreckage, their searchlights cutting through the gloom. What they were about to pull from the depths was more than just a downed enemy plane. It was an omen, a ghost from the future, and it would become one of the most chilling intelligence discoveries of the war's final, desperate months. For nearly 3 years, Japanese pilots had dueled with this very machine over the Solomon Islands, Rabaul, and the Philippines. They had come to fear its terrifying speed, its devastating firepower, and a ruggedness that seemed to defy destruction. But they had never, ever had one of their own. Not a complete one. Not one they could tear apart, piece by piece, to understand the terrifying truth of how far behind they had fallen. This isn't just a story about a captured airplane. No, this is the story of a technological reckoning, the exact moment Japan's finest aviation minds came face to face with the sheer scale of American industrial and engineering might. In the guts of this single fighter, they would uncover secrets about manufacturing, materials, and design that would completely shatter everything they thought they knew about their own capabilities. The Corsair that Japanese salvage crews raised from the water was the absolute pinnacle of American fighter design. Born from a demanding United States Navy request back in 1938, the F4U had transformed from a radical idea into one of the war's most formidable aircraft. You couldn't miss it. That distinctive inverted gull wing, the monstrous Pratt and Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, and performance that was simply revolutionary. But what was its real secret? It achieved a perfect harmony, a balance of speed, firepower, range, and sheer toughness that Japanese aviation had desperately struggled to find. The Corsair's story really begins in 1938. The Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics put out a call for a new fighter, but this was no ordinary request. They wanted a plane that could break 400 miles per hour in level flight. Think about that for a second. At the time, most fighters were lucky to hit 350. But the Navy didn't just want speed. They wanted the whole package: a low stall speed for tricky carrier landings, a range of 1,000 miles, heavy guns, and the ability to haul bombs. So how did the Chance Vought Company respond? With sheer audacity. The chief designer, Rex Beazle, and his team decided to build their plane around the biggest, baddest engine they could find, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp. This 18-cylinder, two-row radial beast churned out 2,000 horsepower, nearly double what most other fighters had. To translate that raw power into thrust, they needed a massive propeller, 13 feet and 4 inches in diameter, the largest ever bolted to a fighter. This created an immediate engineering puzzle. How do you give a prop that huge enough ground clearance without making the landing gear long, heavy, and weak for carrier operations? The answer became the Corsair's most iconic feature. Instead of a standard straight wing, Beazle's team dreamed up the inverted gull wing. Picture this. The wings angle down from the fuselage before flattening out, creating that unforgettable M shape from the front. This clever design kept the landing gear short and strong while still giving that giant propeller plenty of room to spin. It also happened to be incredibly aerodynamic, slicing drag to a minimum. The prototype, the XF4U-1, first took to the skies on May 29, 1940, with Lyman Bullard Jr. at the controls. Then, on October 1, 1940, it made headlines. During a flight between Stratford and Hartford, the XF4U-1 hit a ground speed of 405 miles per hour, becoming the first single-engine American fighter to pass that magic number. Now, its true top speed in level flight was closer to 378 miles per hour at 23,500 feet. But even that was phenomenal for 1940. Production models of the F4U Corsair started getting to the front lines in late 1942. Marine Fighter Squadron VMF 124 got the first batch, deploying to Henderson Field on Guadalcanal on February 12, 1943. But the Corsair's combat debut? It was a disaster. On February 14, 1943, in an event that became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, the Corsairs had a terrible first fight. 9 American aircraft were shot down, 2 Corsairs plus P-38 Lightnings, P-40 Warhawks, and bombers. And the Japanese defenders? They lost only a single Zero fighter, a 9-to-1 loss ratio. It was so bad that daylight bombing missions to Bougainville were called off until they could figure out what went wrong. This brutal lesson proved that having a better plane wasn't enough. You needed the right tactics, experienced pilots, and the right strategy. So, did this mean the Corsair was a failure? Not at all. American pilots learned, and they learned fast. They figured out that the Corsair wasn't a nimble dogfighter. Trying to outturn a Zero at low speeds was suicide. The Corsair's real strength lay in what they called boom and zoom tactics. You couldn't outturn a Zero, but you could outdive it, outclimb it, and outrun it. The key was to use your speed and altitude advantage. You'd dive on an enemy, unleash a torrent of fire, and then use your superior speed to climb away before they even knew what hit them. Second Lieutenant Kenneth A. Walsh of VMF 124 became the first Corsair ace on May 13, 1943, by mastering these very tactics, eventually racking up 21 victories. Through 1943 and 1944, the Corsair's legend grew. Marine squadrons in the Solomons, operating from rough coral airstrips, pushed the plane's ruggedness to the limit. It could soak up damage that would have torn lighter Japanese fighters to pieces. And its firepower was just overwhelming. Imagine 6 50-caliber Browning machine guns, with the 4 inboard guns carrying 400 rounds each, and the 2 outboard guns carrying 375 rounds each. That's a total of 2,350 rounds of pure destruction. Later models, like the F4U 1C, swapped the machine guns for 4 20mm cannons, but many pilots still preferred the 50 cals for their reliability and sheer amount of ammo. The Corsair was more than just a dogfighter, though. By mid-1944, it was a true fighter-bomber. They were regularly hauling 1,000-pound bombs, 8 5-inch high-velocity rockets, or even napalm. This made the Corsair a godsend for troops on the ground during amphibious landings. During the Okinawa campaign in 1945, Corsairs flew thousands of ground attack missions, earning them the nickname Angels of Okinawa from the grateful infantry below. But what Japanese pilots saw in the heat of battle was only half the story. From the cockpit of a Zero, you saw a monster that was faster, tougher, and hit harder. But to truly understand why, to grasp the engineering magic behind it, you had to get your hands on one. Japan's top technical minds were concentrated in 2 places: the Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal and the Army Aviation Technical Research Institute at Tachikawa. Throughout the war, these were the guys who picked apart captured Allied planes, trying to reverse engineer their secrets. They had learned a lot from wreckage salvaged across the Pacific, but most of it was just that: wreckage. Damaged, incomplete, and full of holes. An intact, operational frontline American fighter? That was the Holy Grail. The Yokosuka facility had been a center for technical research since April 1, 1932. By World War II, it was a massive complex, employing thousands of engineers and technicians. These were the brilliant minds behind many of Japan's own naval aircraft. So when that salvaged Corsair arrived at Yokosuka in early 1945, it was like a visitor from another world. It was one of the most advanced American fighters they had ever recovered in one piece. Sure, the plane had suffered water damage, but the basic structure was sound. The recovery teams had managed to keep it from sinking, and now it sat in Yokosuka's secure technical area, ready to give up its secrets. The first step was a careful assessment. Despite being dunked in salt water, the Corsair was remarkably whole. The massive Pratt and Whitney engine would need a complete teardown, but the airframe itself had no combat damage. Why was this so important? Because with previous captures, it was often hard to tell what was a design feature and what was just battle damage. Here, they had a clean slate. The Japanese specialists began by methodically photographing and measuring everything. Wingspan, 40 feet, 11.7 inches. Length, 33 feet, 4 inches. Height, 15 feet with the wings down, 16 feet, 2.3 inches with them folded up. That inverted gull wing immediately grabbed their attention. They understood the theory behind it, the aerodynamic and structural benefits. But they also saw the sheer complexity of manufacturing it. Making those compound curves, holding those precise angles, it required a level of tooling and quality control that most Japanese factories at this stage of the war simply couldn't manage. Then, as they examined the wings, they found something that just didn't make sense. Portions of the outer wings were covered in fabric, not metal, but fabric. From the main wing spar back, both the top and bottom surfaces, as well as the ailerons, elevators, and rudder, were fabric covered. To the Japanese engineers, this was baffling. By 1944, shouldn't a modern fighter be all metal? But further analysis revealed a more complex truth. The fabric was a smart design choice from back in 1938. It saved weight in areas where structural loads were low, freeing up precious aluminum for the parts that really mattered. The fabric itself was a specially treated material that was strong, weatherproof, and weighed a fraction of what metal skin would. It was a sign of a mature design philosophy, using the right material for the right job to get the best performance. Taking the wing apart revealed even more impressive and unsettling construction methods. The main wing spar, the backbone of the wing, was a massive single piece of forged aluminum of incredible quality. American metallurgy was producing aluminum alloy forgings with a strength that Japanese facilities could only dream of matching. This one component spoke volumes. American industry could churn out large, complex forgings with perfect consistency, while Japanese manufacturing was forced to build similar structures from smaller, weaker pieces. The internal structure of the wing told a similar story. The ribs, stamped from aluminum sheet, were remarkably precise. Each one was a perfect twin of the next, a testament to a manufacturing process with unbelievably tight quality control. In Japan, consistency was becoming a casualty of war, with parts varying wildly from plane to plane. Next, they turned their attention to the Corsair's teeth. 6 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, all packed neatly into the wings. The whole installation was a marvel of design, compact, reliable, and easy to maintain. But what really impressed the Japanese examiners wasn't just the firepower, but the completeness of the system. The ammo boxes, the feed chutes, the ejection ports, everything was engineered to work together flawlessly. The guns themselves were masterpieces of precision manufacturing. The Browning M2 was a design that had been perfected over decades and was now being mass-produced by the millions with stunning consistency. As the Japanese technicians looked at these weapons, they saw manufacturing techniques their own factories couldn't hope to replicate reliably. Finding 150 pounds of armor plate around the cockpit and a 1.5-inch thick panel of bullet-resistant glass was another revelation. Japanese fighter design had mostly sacrificed armor for lightweight and maneuverability. The Zero's early victories seemed to prove this was the right call. But as American fighters got more powerful, that lack of protection became a death sentence. The Corsair proved that with brilliant engineering and a powerful enough engine, you could have both heavy armor and incredible performance. And that engine dominated the entire examination. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp was the peak of American aero-engine technology. 18 cylinders, 2,800 cubic inches of displacement, and over 2,000 horsepower. It was a mechanical masterpiece. They had seen this engine before, in other wrecks, but never one in this good of a condition. Taking it apart was like looking into the future. The cylinders were machined with tolerances measured in the thousandths of an inch. The pistons, connecting rods, and crankshaft had a surface finish and dimensional accuracy that Japanese engine makers struggled to achieve even on their best days. Its two-stage supercharger, designed to pump out power at high altitudes, was a complex web of internal passages and perfectly fitted components. Japan's own attempts to build such a system had mostly ended in failure, but perhaps the most incredible thing was its sheer reliability. American radial engines could be counted on to produce their rated horsepower for hundreds of hours between overhauls. Japanese engines, even brand new ones, often fell short of their power ratings and needed constant coddling. The R2800's secret sauce? Superior metals, better lubricants, more precise manufacturing, and a fanatical devotion to quality control. The propeller system was just as revealing. The Hamilton Standard Hydromatic propeller, with its 13-foot, 4-inch diameter and variable pitch, was another piece of advanced tech. Japanese engineers understood the theory, but they simply lacked the facilities to build propellers that large, with that kind of precision. As they looked at system after system, a clear pattern emerged. The landing gear was complex, but built like a Swiss watch. The cockpit was a dizzying array of gauges and controls, far beyond anything in Japanese fighters. The fuel system had self-sealing tanks, a technology Japan largely lacked. The electrical system was clean, organized, and robust. What was the common thread? It was the overall quality of everything. From the biggest structural beam to the smallest screw, every single component showed consistent, high-quality manufacturing. The aluminum was uniform. The steel was properly treated. The finish was professional. The entire aircraft felt solid, well-made, and built to survive. It was a brutal contrast to the state of Japanese aircraft production in 1945. Wartime shortages meant using substitute materials. The quality of aluminum had dropped. Skilled workers were being sent to the front lines. And factories were under constant threat from American bombers. Quantity had replaced quality. This whole examination of the captured Corsair was happening as Japan was staring into the abyss. American B-29 bombers were burning its cities to the ground. The Imperial Navy was shattered. The Philippines were lost. Iwo Jima had fallen, and Okinawa was a bloody battleground. In this context of desperation, the Corsair analysis took on a dark, somber meaning. This wasn't about gathering intelligence to win the next battle. This was a final, painful reckoning with technological reality. The Japanese engineers at Yokosuka wrote their reports. They were professional, filled with measurements and technical descriptions. But you could read between the lines. In almost every single category, American technology was not just better, it was light years ahead. This wasn't a gap that could be closed with a little more effort. It represented years of industrial development, massive investment, and a wealth of resources that Japan simply did not have. By the time the war ended in August 1945, at least 2 Corsairs had fallen into Japanese hands. Photos show them with patched wings, suggesting that technicians had tried to get at least one of them flying again for evaluation. We don't know for sure if they ever succeeded, but the effort shows how seriously they took this opportunity. When American occupation forces arrived at Yokosuka in September 1945, they found a treasure trove of technical intelligence. Captured Allied planes were scattered around, along with the detailed reports, drawings, and photos from the Japanese teams who had studied them. The story of the F4U Corsair's examination is about more than just tech specs. It symbolizes the massive chasm that had opened up between American and Japanese aviation. When the Corsair first showed up in early 1943, a skilled Japanese pilot in a Zero could still hold his own. But by 1945, the odds were impossible. The Corsair's technological edge, combined with America's overwhelming numbers and better-trained pilots, was an unbeatable combination. The Corsair achieved an official kill ratio of 11-to-1 against Japanese aircraft. American pilots in Corsairs shot down 2,140 Japanese planes while losing only 189 Corsairs in air-to-air combat during World War II. These staggering numbers weren't just about one plane, they reflected the superiority of the entire American war machine: better training, better logistics, and overwhelming production. The Japanese engineers who took that Corsair apart understood all of this. Their reports were a quiet admission of defeat, an acknowledgement that they were facing an industrial giant. The Corsair itself would go on to serve for many years after World War II. It fought in the Korean War, proving deadly in the ground attack role even as jets took over the skies. Foreign air forces flew it in conflicts into the 1960s. The very last combat missions for a Corsair happened in July 1969 during the short soccer war between Honduras and El Salvador. In a strange twist of fate, a Honduran F4U-5 shot down 3 Salvadoran aircraft, 2 of which were also Corsairs, the final kills for the type, scored against its own kind. For Japan, the encounter with the Corsair was part of a much larger awakening. The same engineers who had struggled with wartime shortages were now working with American authorities to rebuild their nation's industry. The lessons they learned from dissecting American technology, like the Corsair, had a profound influence. That famous Japanese focus on quality, precision, and continuous improvement, you can trace its roots back to the hard lessons learned from staring into the guts of an American war machine. The Corsair, recovered in 1945, was more than just a downed fighter. It was physical proof of an engineering and manufacturing power that Japanese aviation had been chasing all along. The lessons it taught came too late to change the outcome of the war, but they helped shape the peace that came after. In examining that American fighter, Japanese engineers were forced to confront the true scale of the mountain they had tried to climb. They had fought with incredible courage and skill, but in the end, that couldn't overcome the massive technological and industrial advantage of their opponent. The story ends not with a victory, but with a quiet acknowledgement. The Japanese technical reports on the Corsair, now resting in archives, are silent witnesses to that moment of confrontation. The plane they studied is long gone, likely scrapped in the chaos after the war. But its legacy lives on, in the lessons it taught about what technology can achieve when backed by resources, science, and a relentless drive for quality. Japanese aviation would rise again, but its engineers would never again underestimate what their American counterparts could create. That examination of the F4U Corsair was a watershed moment, the point when Japan's aviation experts finally understood the true depth of the technological chasm that had opened up during the war. It was a lesson written not in words, but in aluminum alloys and precision forgings that spoke volumes about the true nature of American industrial power.